May the words of my mouth and the meditation of each heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. My oldest grandchild, who lives out in Denver, is going to be a senior this year in high school. I haven't figured out how that happened since I'm only 35 myself, but still, she's going to be a senior. So, there's something amazing in those 12 years from first grade to 12th grade. So much education happens, so much learning, and you go from being like a little child to being an adult in those 12 years with all that education. We have two 12-year-old issues in our story. This young girl was only 12, the girl that had died and that Jesus raised from the dead. And the woman had suffered 12 years with all these unusual uncontrollable blood flow issues. Long time. As with my granddaughter, so much happens in 12 years. And in 12 years, that little girl and that poor woman who had been suffering were just at the end of their wits. 12 years. And yet, some of us have suffered for a long time. Some of us have suffered chronic pain in our bodies or in our spirits for a long time. Some of us are still dealing and will always deal with the loss of someone we love. And we learn to live with it differently, but it doesn't go away. It's just different. Some of us feel the weight of the world, and it's just like everything is slogging through, trying to make it through the day. There are unfulfilled dreams and hopes. And sometimes in our days, it's like God is off on vacation, some cruise in Cancun or somewhere else where God is not paying attention. And for some people who suffer, they look at others and they see that others are in better shape than they are, and there's no understanding why. So we come back to our text. Last week we heard the story of Jesus in the boat falling asleep, and there was a great storm, and the disciples woke him up and said, we're going to die in this storm. And Jesus stands up and commands the winds and the waves to be silent. He is able to control the nature. And so now he's on the seashore, and he's walking towards the next town, and this leader of the synagogue, Jairus, comes, and he says, "Come and heal my daughter." So Jesus goes to do the healing of Jairus' daughter. And it's just, Mark has this arranged in such an awesome way that as they're going on this way, this unclean woman, blood was a big issue for the ancient Israelites. She was unclean because whatever the hemorrhaging was coming from, it was uncontrollable. For 12 years, she was suffering through this. So like in that mural picture on page 11, she's got down on the ground, reaching through, trying to touch Jesus' cloak, just the hem of his robe, out of desperation. She just touches the robe. And I don't know, Jesus said he could feel power going out of him. He had no idea she was there. The disciples said, "How can you feel that someone touched you and power went out of you?" Because everyone's jostling around, everyone's touching you, everyone's bumping into you. But he knew that someone's faith had made a difference, and his touch healed this woman. I understand where that poor woman was coming from. And sometimes in the crush of feet or the crush of activities or the busyness of where life is going or the desperation of what life has been, I just need to touch and hold on to the hem of the robe of Jesus. I just need to feel the healing presence of love. I just need, and I wonder what it was like that point for her to receive that power of Christ flowing through her by just touching his robe. I can also understand Jairus because, they're heading off to heal his daughter, and suddenly they stop to take care of this unclean woman. Jairus has to be thinking, wait a minute, I got a daughter to take care of here. Why are we wasting time? And then they find out the daughter's dead. So there's just the agony and the pain in this scene. But Jesus doesn't really care about the agony. Sorry, that's not right. Jesus isn't caught up in the agony and the pain because he knows what's going to happen. So here he leaves this unclean woman, now made clean, now made whole, and he heads to Jairus' home, and he raises his little daughter. He raises her from the dead. What does it mean to be healed? For some, it would mean an absolute sense of complete wholeness of physical body, right? To be healed would be completely whole. Now, I've also noticed the older I get, the golden years aren't so golden, right? It's just kind of crazy. Oh, but that's okay. But still, physical wholeness is an important piece. So for some people, healing is a spiritual wholeness, a sense of awesome peace inside, or a sense of community wholeness where you just know where you are and you know you are loved and blessed. Sometimes that's whole. But we live in a broken world. We live in a broken world where sin has affected all parts of all that's going on. We live in a broken world where things fall apart, where disease and death seem to be strong. And yet we come here week after week to proclaim a blessedness in the God who loves us, a blessedness in the God who is always with us, a blessedness in this community where there is care. A blessedness that comes sometimes in medicine and doctor and nurse, sometimes in amazing miracles, but always God working through to bring us to God's presence. But when I struggle with disease and sorrow and suffering and the weight of the world, there is no place I can end up going except the cross. And there God had chosen from the beginning of the world. God chose to enter our pain and suffering. God chose to enter death for you and me where I should be. God chose to take away all of my burdens and all of my junk and all of the disease and all of that of all the world of all time, nailed to himself on the cross. At the cross, we find God's answer to suffering. And there, in the suffering one who rises on Easter, there in the suffering one, we find hope, and we find life, and we find promise that in every life Easter will come. We find promise that in every life all the brokenness will be wrapped together in God's love, and we will understand the awesomeness of God's presence. In Jesus and in Jesus' time, there is healing. I don't always get it. I wish it would come earlier. I wish I had a script so I could understand it better. I wish it would be today, right? I don't always get it, but I trust in the one who loves. There's a word in this text also that has just stuck with me throughout the week, and the word is touch. The woman touched the robe of Jesus, and she was made whole. Jesus touched the little girl, and she was brought back to life. There is unhealthy touch. We were not allowed to touch each other during the COVID years. We are and stay away from each other. Crazy time. There is also abuse, which never has a place in any home or in any family or in any person or in anywhere. And so let me just say, if you are struggling with being abused, let someone know. It sounds like an advertisement, it probably is, but I just need to put out there that abuse, unhealthy touch, doesn't belong anywhere. But there are healthy touches that we need. Sometimes the healthy touch is a touch of a loved one or a friend. Sometimes the healthy touch is the healing power of a doctor or a nurse or a technician. Sometimes at Bethlehem, I have noticed a healthy touch is the passing of the peace. You're taking too long. Hallelujah, right? It's just noisy and active, and that says, that says the passing of the peace is a healthy touch time. That's really cool. Sometimes the touching of prayers for healing. Sometimes I'd sense the touch of Jesus here in times of worship and in music and in beauty of creation. You know, there's no physical hand on my shoulder or head, but I have that sense that he is present. Sometimes I have the touch of Jesus in the hands of others who care. Always, the presence of Jesus brings hope. And because of the touch of Jesus, you and I have the ability to do the touching with a word of forgiveness. You and I have the ability and the joy to reach out in our kind acts of touching through giving of food or making of quilts or bringing in your offering or going to visit folks in faraway lands or touching strangers here with care or touching and caring for children. Our gift of love in multiple ways are the ways that we touch with the touch of Jesus, where we carry on the ministry that Jairus found out about and this woman found out about. That God's love is awesome, that God desires the best for us, that in the midst of struggle and pain, we are not alone, but we are filled with the presence of God. That God creates so many ways for us to be healed, and it's always in God's time, not ours, but still, it's always in the bottom good. And always, like Jairus' daughter and the woman, always you are blessed. Always you are blessed. Amen.